Every empire claims that money is always safe. Every state insists that the promises it gives will remain valid forever. But history keeps showing us something very different. From Rome to France, from confederations to Lebanon, people usually realize too late that the money they saved for years has lost its value, that their salaries have melted away, that the systems they thought were solid have collapsed almost overnight. In the end, uprisings break out. The collapse of financial systems is not actually rare. On the contrary, most of the time it is the rule. So the question we should ask is not, do systems collapse? How do we protect ourselves when they do? The most dangerous mistake is this: believing this order will always continue. We look at our bank balances, at the world's currencies, and assume they will naturally remain valuable. Yet money is not something fundamental. It is entirely trust, and trust can disappear in a single night. That is why crises and teach. Every collapse leaves behind lessons about what really protects wealth and what disappears in an instant. Those who study history carefully notice this. Survivors are usually not the strongest. They are the ones who learn to question first. The Byzantine Empire is a good example. Known as the eastern half of Rome, this empire remained standing for 1,000 years after Western Rome collapsed. At the center of its power was the gold solidus, which merchants accepted without hesitation, almost the global reserve currency of the Middle Ages. Rome kept devaluing the silver denarius and drove itself into disaster. Surely Byzantium learned from that. But no. Centuries later, Byzantium made the same mistake. They lowered the purity of the gold and mixed in cheaper alloys. At first nobody noticed, then trust collapsed. The solidus stopped being the backbone of Mediterranean trade and turned into an ordinary political tool. As the money lost value, Byzantium's economic power melted away with it. So who won? Not the promises on paper, not government decrees. Those who quietly collected gold and land in distant regions won. While everyone else watched their money disappear, they preserved their wealth. This reminds us of something. States often cannot resist the temptation to devalue their currencies. When that happens, value escapes into things that cannot be imitated. But not every collapse happens only because of leaders' mistakes. Sometimes massive blows arrive that no one expects. The Black Death swept across Europe in the 14th century. Between 1347 and 1351, almost half the population vanished. Cities emptied, trade routes broke apart. But the story is not only destruction. Once people became scarce, labor became precious. Survivors could demand better wages. Land that had once been expensive was sold for almost nothing. Those who could buy abandoned places gained power. Those who had some cash, silver, goods, or even simply the ability to work gained an advantage they never expected. If this sounds familiar, don't be surprised. During COVID, we experienced a smaller version of the same thing. When supply shrinks, the balance can change instantly. The balance broke. Governments printed trillions so the system wouldn't stop completely. Those with liquidity, extra cash on the side, rose, while millions living on salaries struggled. In America, houses and land became more expensive. The stock market recovered almost instantly. But millions of ordinary people fought just to pay rent. The picture was clear. And had liquidity bought properties, stocks, and businesses that others could no longer hold. Pandemics redistribute wealth. They always have. Those who survived the Black Death used scarcity to climb the social ladder. Those who survived COVID. The lesson isn't pleasant, but it's true. Crises reward those with reserves. They punish those without them. While pandemics show how quickly shocks can topple an economy, the collapse of banking in Renaissance Florence reminds us of another truth. Institutions that seem too big to fail can fall like dominoes. In the 1340s, Florence was Europe's financial capital. Powerful banking families like the Bardis and Peruzzis lent enormous sums to kings. The riskiest of all was the credit given to England's King Edward III. When Edward stopped paying during the war with France, the banks collapsed. Depositors were ruined, trade stopped, and Florence fell into chaos. Ordinary people who trusted the city's magnificent bankers learned a bitter lesson. Big does not mean safe. And people realized too big to fail is as old as finance isn't real. Institutions exist to make profit, not to protect you. When they collapse, they can take your savings with them. This lesson repeated for centuries, from Florence to Lehman Brothers in 2008 and to Lebanese banks freezing accounts in 2019. Those who survived were the ones who realized that institutional promises only work until the day they don't. The American Civil War is usually remembered for battles, politics, and the end of slavery. But behind the scenes, there was a harsh financial war that most Americans still struggle to understand. Both North and South realized that fighting a war on that scale required printing money. The South was worse. To find resources, the Confederacy printed unimaginable amounts of money. The result? Massive inflation. Prices rose by thousands of %. Wages bought almost nothing. Soldiers' paychecks lost value before they them. People carried bags of money just to buy bread. By 1865, Confederate money wasn't just weak, it was dead. In that collapse, the valuable things weren't paper. They were real assets: land, food, gold. Ordinary people who trusted money were ruined. Opportunists with access to tangible goods built fortunes cheaply. It's a lesson Americans rarely hear, but shouldn't forget. And let's not forget, like many countries, your country also experienced currency collapse. Back then, protection didn't come from trusting the paper in your wallet, but from owning values inflation couldn't destroy. France showed that revolutions can destroy money even faster than wars. In the 1790s, the new government seized church lands and printed a new currency, the assignat, backed by this property. They kept printing, and every new issue devalued the last one. Prices soared, wages stalled, and the currency collapsed. Farmers refused to accept paper. They wanted goods or silver. Bread riots returned. Who won? Not those holding patriotic paper, those with food, gold, and property. Fast forward 2 centuries, the lesson reappeared in Asia. In 1997, the attack on the Thai baht triggered a regional crisis. Countries borrowing in dollars suddenly couldn't repay once their currencies collapsed. Investors fled, unemployment rose, the IMF stepped in, and once again, ordinary people suffered. Those who held dollars and assets abroad endured better. Those who trusted local currency were crushed. Meanwhile, Wall Street institutions scooped up Asian assets cheaply. A local crisis turned into a global wealth transfer, and this lesson repeated from Brazil to Argentina. Borrowing in someone else's currency is a trap. When the storm hits, it's not the lender who drowns, it's the borrower. Now the picture becomes clearer. Revolutionary France, the American Civil War, modern Asia, all share the same theme. Paper money collapses, and debt chains both nations and families. And the survivors are not those who blindly trust the system, but those who see its fragility beforehand. This isn't just history, it's happening today. In Lebanon between 2019 to 2021, banks locked their doors. Deposits were frozen, withdrawals limited, and the currency lost over 90% of its value. Lifetime savings turned into pocket change. People lined up outside banks demanding their own money, but couldn't get it. Even the middle class vanished. The lesson was brutal. Money in the bank is not a treasure chest. It is a loan you give to an institution that may not pay you back in a crisis. Those who held up best were the ones who diversified, owned real values like gold and property, or kept liquidity outside the system. And this shouldn't feel distant. In 2008, people lost homes while banks were rescued. In 2020, trillions were printed. Asset prices rose while wages froze. In 2023, some U.S. banks collapsed overnight, reminding us that the too big to fail story lasts only until the doors close. So, how do you protect yourself when everything turns upside down? History doesn't give just one answer. In Byzantium, gold mattered. After the Black Death, liquidity meant owning abandoned land. In Florence, not trusting megabanks saved lives. In the Confederacy, durable goods were valuable. In France, food and property. In Asia, avoiding foreign currency debt. In Lebanon, getting out of the system before banks shut down. Patterns change. The theme stays the same. Survival isn't about blindly trusting paper and institutions. It's about recognizing real value. Here lies the paradox. Collapse is both tragedy and opportunity. For the unprepared, it's destruction. For those with resilience, liquidity, and assets that cannot be printed, it's the chance to build wealth cheaply. After the Black Death, peasants became landowners. After 2008, those with cash bought foreclosed homes. Protection isn't only defense, it's knowing where to stand while everyone else retreats. And wealth isn't only what you own, it's what you can do. The baker who makes bread, the craftsman who repairs tools, the farmer who feeds people, the merchant who moves goods. They didn't just survive, they thrived in crises. In every crisis, money loses value. Production does not. People still need to eat, build, and trade. Those who can meet these needs do not stay poor for long. Real protection isn't blind trust. It's real assets plus real skills, plus knowing that illusions eventually collapse. Every crisis has transferred wealth from the trusting to the prepared, from paper to substance, from passive to productive. So the question isn't, will something happen? Something always breaks. The real question is, will you cling to promises, or to real value? History may not repeat exactly, but it crushes those who ignore it in the same way. If this gave you a new perspective, come along. Let's continue together. History holds the answers. I'll show